It's not very often that I will do a rambling video with a katana in my hand, but I felt it was very necessary given the topic that I'm going to cover today in one of my complete and utter ramblings. And that is about multiculturalism in HEMA. And I'm going to talk about this from a couple of different perspectives. But what really kind of triggered this thought process goes all the way back to when I was on a trip to Ireland. And because I knew I was going to be going and exploring ruins and castles and a very, very kind of medieval style countryside, honestly, I didn't want to get burned out on the European experience. So I decided to read a book that normally I wouldn't read. And it's called Samurai Swordsmanship. Got it for very, very cheap on Amazon, on a Kindle, and read it while I was over there. And it was a very, very interesting and good read, especially for someone like me who comes from that more kind of HEMA style background and is more concerned about the mechanics of how you would approach sword fighting, and in this case, how you would approach sword fighting with one of these. Now, the reason I bring this up is because multiculturalism in HEMA is this kind of very important thing, both as a positive and a negative thing. And so I want to kind of speak to that because you have to kind of temper this concept as you're looking at how it can benefit HEMA and how it can be a detriment. So I'm going to give you the example. The benefit. Having many people involved from all sorts of different walks of life and all sorts of different martial arts backgrounds, it doesn't matter. Having that variety of people gives a lot of unique insight. And as we all work together to build our understanding of what medieval swordsmanship and Renaissance swordsmanship and general historical European martial combat would have been like, it's good having those pieces of insight. What is not good is beginning to take pieces from other bits of martial arts and trying to apply it very artificially into HEMA. Now, it's not a bad thing necessarily from a martial arts perspective as a whole, but it doesn't really help further the cause of trying to understand the historical significance of what we're trying to uncover. Now, some people may not care about the historical significance. They will only truly care about, I want to fight with swords. That's what I want to do. I want to go join tournaments. Okay, so maybe you can get some benefit from that. But speaking to the insight aspect, I found that reading this Samurai Swordsmanship book was very, very interesting. And here's why. There were some very interesting bits of insight, not just in the mechanics of using a katana and using it in the style that would have been done both a long time ago as well as actually the recent past. But also there were thought processes for how not only to train, but how you can help train others. And there are thought processes as to like why you want to understand and have experience in martial arts. So I'll give you an example. It's one of my favorite quotes that came from this book. And it is a quote. It's attributed as an old samurai adage. And that is the concept that you can be a pacifist. You can choose not to fight. And that's fully acceptable. And not only that, but it's a very noble thing. And honestly, avoiding the fight is always the best solution if possible. But their adage is, a warrior can choose pacifism. All others are condemned to it. And I think it's actually a really powerful statement, one that is probably one of my new favorite sayings, because the more you think about it, the more you dwell on it, you realize that is very true. If you know how to fight and you know how to defend yourself, then you're less likely, hopefully, to ever get into a situation where you're stuck and unable to. And that ultimately, yes, pacifism, best solution if possible. But if you don't know how to fight, that's all you got. You don't actually have a choice. Very interesting concept. So one of my new favorite quotes. But there are a lot of other concepts that are talked about in this book. And I'm not going to do a review on this book. I thought about it, but the problem is I don't really have the background in usage of a katana and just general Japanese sword arts, so I can't really speak intelligently about it. I can only say that from a HEMA background, I thought it was a very interesting read. The first volume of it that I read was very introductory, very basic, but it gave me great insight into the mechanics. But I will recommend this book. I would say that if you are a HEMA practitioner, it's actually a very interesting read, and especially if you are a HEMA instructor, I think it's got some very valuable insight. And what I wanted to talk about today, as kind of a sidetrack from the concept of multiculturalism, is the concept of training someone is not beating them consistently all the time and just telling them you need to get better so eventually you can beat me. But rather, you challenge yourself as an instructor, as a superior martial artist. You challenge yourself, but you also challenge your pupil. If you purposefully lose, but only just barely. And that's a concept that's talked about a lot in the book that I was reading. It's the concept of, I know that when you come at me with a really, really basic strike, I have 12 different ways I can win. But what I should choose to do is find the one way that I will win, but will challenge that practitioner, that new martial arts practitioner, to actually maybe get a little bit better. And it's actually a very hard thing to do. It's very hard to lose, but just barely. But that is how you both train up that person, get them better, but it's also how you learn more self-control. And I think that's a very interesting piece of insight that I know I have never heard expressed from anyone in the HEMA community. Not to say that it hasn't been done, but the fact that reading this book is actually reading a bit of information written from a long line of trained swordsmen and their approach to things, an unbroken line from something like the 15th century. And they actually, in this book, they actually go through and talk about the records so you can see the unbroken line of masters and students throughout the ages. And you're getting insight into how to train from a swordmaster's mouth. I mean, straight from the master himself. And I think that's a very interesting thing that we don't necessarily get in HEMA. We get the manuals, we get the information, but we don't necessarily always have the insight into the best ways to train and train up other people. So I wanted to bring that up because I thought it was a very unique piece of insight, and I'm glad I read this book almost exclusively for how it talks about how to train people and how you should manage like a school when you're training. And then it had some great adages in there. It had some just great quotes, great sayings, a lot of very interesting things. And again, these are things that don't modify HEMA. That doesn't change what we teach. It doesn't change the historical methods. But what it does, it gives us insights into things that we may not get. It actually bolsters and enhances our understanding of martial arts in the historical concept as well as the modern concept. So, recommend that book, and I highly recommend that we look and we seek to draw in people from many different cultures, many different backgrounds, because the worst thing that we could do in the HEMA community, and I don't really see this, I don't think we're in danger of doing this, but it's the worst thing that could happen, is you get a bunch of European white males fighting with swords, and you exclude everyone else. That exclusion actually is detrimental, in my opinion, to getting the right approach that we need. Again, I don't really think we see this in HEMA. The clubs that are around me, I've seen people from all different backgrounds coming in, and that's great. But having those backgrounds can lead to some very interesting things. And this book is a very interesting book, and I highly suggest everyone goes out and picks it up and reads it, because I think it's very fascinating. I have learned a lot about how to use a katana. I'm not a practitioner, but I understand the process. I understand the meaning behind the different movements, and that they're not just something that's done, but there is a purpose to it. Some things are really interesting in it, and I will say I could speak for ages about this book, especially because it was such interesting insight. I'm not going to do it because I want to save those surprises for you, my viewers, to go read this book and be surprised as well. But overall, a great book, interesting topic, and I hope this is something that we in the HEMA community tackle regularly and bolster and really go after, because in the end, the best way to become a good martial artist is to be open to every idea as long as it doesn't go against the tried and true methods and the teachings that we are trying to uncover historically.